Hello! Welcome to the Free Will Science and Religion podcast. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega and wsdtime.
Yeah.
Yeah. That didn't sound quite like your usual
Yeah, I know, but something on my mind. Sorry.
Yeah, he had.
That's all right.
Yeah, WC's not quite in the same mood as usual. So anyway, here's our topic that I'm proposing today is now the co-hosts of the Free Will Science and Religion podcast. We have been trying to explain in over 180 episodes why we don't have a free will and how everything is deterministic or causal, as George and I would say. Some people think that things happen for no reason, which doesn't have free will. And now we've been hammering that point for so long that we're tired of it almost. But today we're going to be talking about something that's related but different. How do you get people who believe in free will to stop blaming each other and to not seek this retributive justice based on the feeling of deserve? Are there alternative ways where we can reduce blame because it's shown that it doesn't work, it doesn't reduce crime, it doesn't make a happier world? And I do have one example of how this may happen. And it was actually Yuri that gave me this idea, because he tries to be amoral and he tries to not use any language of morality, acting like there's nothing good or bad. And while I don't necessarily agree with that approach, I have been wondering, I've been meditating on this, and I've been thinking, well, if somebody is a moral relativist or nihilist, where they don't believe that there is a right or wrong, well, then they can't give anybody credit or blame. They can't praise or blame anybody because nobody can do anything good or bad if there is no good or bad. So it kind of blows your mind. And I'm not saying I agree with this moral relativism, but I'm wondering can that be used to our advantage somehow?
All right, I think it'd be good to maybe start off with what we mean by blame.
Yeah.
Because, within the free will context, we distinguish between blaming someone and identifying someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think what we generally mean is to identify someone, somebody does something both either good or bad, and under the no free will perspective, fine, we don't blame or praise them, but we still identify them as the proximate cause or whatever, But that's different than kind of I think blaming, just suggests an additional element of hostility, I think, of aggression, of just, hostility directed toward the person. So how's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds about right, George, because, we all identify who is causing us harm. It's very important to identify. There's always somebody who was driving that car drunk, or who was shooting that gun, or who was slaughtering those animals. There's always a person doing a lot of these things, but that doesn't mean that person should be punished because they deserve it. Like we're blaming them because we're believing that they actually chose to be that way, to be the kind of a person who did that. And there's several reasons that we know that they did not choose it, that true choice, as people think of it, is an illusion. But, so there is a difference between identifying a person who is causing a problem, but also knowing they're not the first cause of it.
All right, so let's move into, what do you suggest are some ways that we don't really need to blame people to kind of mold their behavior in a productive way?
Well, the simple solution, say for example, some people blame this guy. He's out on the streets somewhere, on my job somewhere, and that because John's bank messed up his paycheck, and now he getting evicted from his house. He has nowhere to go. Feel bad for him, but at the same time, I've just seen some people blame him. When it comes to that, I would think that we should sympathize for him, when it comes to in that case. I mean, feel some sort of sympathy for him.
Yeah.
When it comes to that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there is, that's another thing, for example, because, the free will belief is where people think that somebody deserves to be poor, that they chose to be poor, or just like people say someone chose to be overweight. And now, here's one example. Now, for example, in certain specific cases, people are able to see, the educated people are able to see that people don't choose to be poor, and they don't choose to be overweight, or they don't choose to be gay or whatever. People see this in small examples. A lot of them never carry it to the fullest extent and realize that nobody chooses anything, but they can at least realize that a person doesn't choose a specific thing, and then therefore they stop blaming them on that specific issue. So that's an example.
All right, that's good. So another example is kind of like we apply this to kids, to infants, toddlers, basically, to people who, have some kind of a disability where they can't understand things, whatever. Just the idea that that some of us, like, rather than saying, well, that this person should have known better or whatever, we kind of conclude, well, wait a minute, the kid's like 3 years old, he didn't know any better. And I think people kind of like get this without, having to get into whether the kid had a free will or not. I think it's like, something that like we get the person didn't have enough knowledge, and you can't blame that person for not having enough knowledge about whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an example because people are not as harsh with kids as they are adults. And when you think about it, why is that? Like, why do they have a difference in how they treat them?
Yeah, I think knowledge. Go ahead.
I think they believe they have a less of knowledge barrier there, so they believe, sure, they get mad at it, but they can't really stay mad because they know they don't know any better. Just like this kid on my bus. Yeah, he like I say, he has a mental disorder and all that, but thing is, he'll like pick up his shoes and throw it and all that, but I never really get mad at him because I know, that's a condition he has and he can't really help it. So, I mean, things like that.
Yeah, and you just pointed to another example. So it's not just about a person's age or about knowledge. It's like, in the medical community, psychiatry and all that stuff, they recognize whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it is, they don't blame people for like becoming emotionally ill. Even like with something like alcoholism and drug abuse, the people are getting the point now that, these are illnesses that happen to people, and people generally aren't blamed for those kinds of illnesses.
Yeah. Here's another example. Like, let's take the case of self-defense. Like, when somebody breaks into somebody's house, and then the person ends up hurting or killing the burglar or whatever in the process of trying to defend themselves, we don't blame the person who, even though they killed somebody, we know it was in self-defense, and therefore we don't blame them, because we say that, well, I would have done the same thing if someone had done that to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, that brings us to another, like, I mean, back, in Greek times, and this isn't actually something that's really accepted now, but theoretically it could be. It's like, some of the Greeks had this belief that at the time anyone does anything, in their mind, they're justifying it. Like somebody, just acts, with violence against someone else or something like that. They say, well, this person deserved it. Like, this is like, whatever. So there's basically the people believe that. And I guess, that could be used as the free will thing doesn't get into that, so I guess that could be another way that like, that. Well, wait a minute. That no. Wait. How do we? So if that's the belief, yeah, I guess it absolves them. It's just like that they thought they were doing the right thing. So it's kind of like it's a matter of mistaken knowledge, mistaking right for wrong, but not intentionally.
Yeah, I remember that. In fact, remember that one guy who was doing that podcast called Who Said Anything About Free Will? I don't know whatever happened to that, but I remember when I was listening to that, he went back in time and talked to Socrates. And that was what Socrates believed in that podcast, that each person at the time of choice thinks that they're doing the right thing that they end up doing.
Yeah, I remember. I think he ended up doing like 3 or 4 podcasts, and I remember realizing by the 3rd or 4th that he does believe in free will. But he had the 1st and 2nd episodes. You weren't. He wasn't quite clear on that.
That's really disappointing.
Yeah.
And I think it's so funny too, because the guy who did that, he had a podcast about evolution and explaining natural selection and all that. And you would think that anybody who understands evolution and understands what really drives behavior would know that free will is bogus. You would think so. But yeah, do you guys think that belief is true, in that people justify in their minds and think that they're doing the right thing, even if they're mistaken?
Well, to answer your question, yes. I think they do believe that, yes, it is, they're doing the right thing in their mind.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think that to a certain extent, in order to take a certain action, you kind of have already thought out in your mind, and you think that you're doing something good. You may later in hindsight realize it wasn't so good, but at the time I don't think anybody knows better.
Right, and then sometimes people will say, oh, they really knew better. They really, like, for example, but when you challenge that, then you say, well, all right, well, if they knew better, why didn't they do better, right? And then they'll say, well, because, and they'll come up with some other reason, right? Some other rationale. Let's say it's a person that worked for a company, and and he knew he was wrong for, they'll say he knew he was wrong for stealing from the company or something, right? He did that, and then you ask him, well, if he knew he was wrong, why did he do it? And then they'd say, well, because the company, wasn't paying the employees enough or something. So, like, there's always a rationalization in the person's mind. So I think with that, just by asking, by probing more and more, we can get those people to understand that we always tend to do what we believe is the right thing.
Yeah, and here's another thing, guys. Like, for example, it was not very long ago that there were actually 2 people that I know that are Trump supporters. One of them, was a person who works with me at Hy-Vee. Another person was my dentist, and they think that Trump is going to do good for this country and that he's an honest guy and all this stuff. And to me, I just find that so hard to believe. And yet these people genuinely do believe that Trump was the better candidate, and I find that just so interesting.
Oh yeah, and it's so bizarre because of some of the horrible things that Trump did.
Yeah, trust me, I know one guy at my job, right? He believes that Trump is going to fix the country. He still does. I'm like, nah. Really, I really say that to him because I get in an accident and he's my safety, because he's one of the safety managers. For, like, if you do something or you mess up on something, they kind of reevaluate you. So if he says something wrong, I don't want his bias interfering with anything I do, just in case for the future,
Yeah.
I don't say nothing. Yeah.
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 Oh yeah, but I just find it very interesting, because I think that like, and whether or not we agree with who somebody votes for or whatever else it may be, like, I don't think that people genuinely do something that they know to be wrong. They have to in some way think they're doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
come up with an example of of something that would be to the contrary.
Yeah.
You know, for example, George Washington. Like perfect example. Had the Americans lost that war, in the history books we would have been reading about how he was such a traitor. But because he was on our
Mm-hmm.
side, whatever, he's a hero. So it also depends on how things turn out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. Yeah, so can you guys think of any other ways where people don't blame people?
Hmm.
Well, I think that the concept of forgiveness, relates to that because, like, forgiveness it's a religious concept. I think it's secular also, of course, but like for example, in Judaism and Christianity, different religions, sometimes you forgive a person even though they don't admit that they did something wrong. It's like this unconditional forgiveness. And even though, like, these religious people, they would not, say that you're forgiving them because they don't have a free will, it actually kind of like amounts to that. It's like it's a way of absolving them without using the term free will. Is like, why do you forgive them? Well, they say it's because, like, because, like, we have original sin and we're all imperfect and stuff. So, and interestingly, even with the example of we always do what we consider to be right, or with like the knowledge and young kids around, it's always, I think, if we dig deeply enough, these other ways that don't necessarily rely on our lack of free will, they can be tied to our lack of free will in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that interesting thing you mentioned about forgiveness there, George. What I find personally interesting about that is the way in which forgiveness is a bizarre thing because under the Christian belief, like we're all evil and we deserve to burn in hell forever. Oh, but God's nice and forgives us and doesn't punish us. That's kind of the way that they do it. Although, of course, it gets more complicated because if you don't believe in God the correct way, then you still burn. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a
I
good
still don't
point.
understand that logic. And yep, he's supposed to be all loving.
Oh, I know, man. It hurts my brain.
Right. So you have somebody who does something really horrible, and like what they say is like, all right, you don't deserve to be forgiven, but we're such a good person, we're such good people, we're going to forgive you. There's something that doesn't quite make sense in that.
Oh, I know, George, but that's exactly right. That's exactly the way that they put it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we've devoted enough time in with the free will refutations to this concept of forgiveness, because I think it is another way that, like, that society does in fact behave as if people don't have free will, but they just refuse to admit that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, cause it's actually, yeah, I think it's actually hard to make sense of forgiveness unless to a certain extent you are realizing a person doesn't deserve to be punished.
I think if you dig deep enough, that would be, that they say, well, like, we're not perfect, everybody makes mistakes, and yeah, duh, because we don't have a free will.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. Huh. Yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else we've forgotten. Although if you guys want, I mean, we can switch to a different topic in the same podcast if you guys have something else in mind.
Uh, let me. Yeah.
Let's see, what else? Well, I mean, we've covered the medical model. We've covered, young kids, forgiveness, being, out of goodness of our hearts, we're doing it because we're good. Well, I think that then I think we can, go through some pragmatic reasons. In other words, like, if we blame people, this whole free will thing aside, people become defensive.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you don't blame people, then they don't feel blamed, they don't feel attacked or threatened, and they're more willing, like say, maybe to admit to something they did wrong or to change their behavior as a result.
Yeah, just like I talked to Buddy, man. It's like, yo, I ain't bash him, I ain't get on him. I'll try to look at the reason why. Because, like I said, I want to know the reasons why. Because, like I said, you can't blame a person because, like I said, I tried to tell them, with my A's on my bus, I tried to tell them that, yo, like I said, you're like this, boy, like, you need some bottle of cigarettes and all this. Nah, not really. Look, the way I see it here is, if we can't just blame him, because honestly, with me, you don't know why. What is the reason why he got put out out there, or why is he homeless now? That's like his bank probably railroaded him, and now he can't make any more last payments, and now he's just screwed up. He just excuse my slang, but shit out of luck. But still.
Yeah, that's a good point, WSD, because if you look at someone's situation, you can't automatically assume, like, let's say that you do believe in blaming people and you do believe in free will. How do you know that person is to blame for the situation they're in? Instead, you might blame somebody else who actually caused it to them.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think you're saying there, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because like I said, what is the outside force and what caused it, and why that come to be, and how they come to be? This is the questions I like to ask, because like I said, you don't know how Buddy got in that situation or what happened in his life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like I said, I believe out there, people don't believe me. I believe there's a lot of bullshit out there. Don't excuse my slang, but I'm serious.
Yeah.
Right. Another method is kind of like this pragmatic is like, for example, if there's a parent and they're raising a 4-year-old or something, and I'm just kind of like guessing. So maybe the 4-year-old they're trying to train them to not eat with their hands and maybe use a spoon or fork or something. I don't know. And like, rather than like, kind of like telling them don't do this when they're eating with their hands, to praise them when they're using the fork or the spoon or something, right? So kind of ignoring, the negative behavior, just not blaming them for whatever, just simply like reinforcing the positive behavior.
Yeah.
As well as the negative, which is why I get on parents so hard. I hit on them so hard. Now bash them every chance I get because sometimes, because you drive a school bus and you see these fucking parents like, oh, my kid couldn't do this. Man, my kid's fault. You just did this. You're a bad driver. Like, fuck off. Get out of here.
Yeah,
I ain't saying like that, but
And teachers, they do that to teachers also. They, like. Their kids can't do any wrong. It's always the teacher's fault and all. So, yeah, they got to I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing because parents, let's face it, what parents are is they're basically anybody who's hit puberty and is biologically capable of reproducing. It doesn't mean they're smart. It doesn't mean they know what they're doing. It doesn't mean they're a moral person. It just means they can reproduce and have kids, and therefore they're a parent.
Even though they shouldn't have any fucking kids, but yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting
a little angry. But I know, man. I feel you exactly, WSD. So it's interesting. So let's role play a little bit. let's say that we were free will believers, okay, which is hard to do, I'm sure. How would we find an alternative way not to blame people for reproducing?
Alternative way of reproducing?
Not to blame people for reproducing.
Yeah.
Well, again, that people that
we were free will. You saying we were free will believers?
Yeah. How would we find an alternative way to stop blaming them for reproducing?
I think what they would say is like.
I
think that they would say, well, you know, it was the hormones, it was the testosterone, you know, like basically like these natural urges, but they wouldn't see that these natural urges are denying the person free will. You know, they would or the, you know, the biochemistry, that, you know, that there's this, like, they would say that there's this drive, an innate biological drive to reproduce, but they still believe that the person has free will. So
I know, and that's an interesting case, because in that particular case, they are basically admitting that a person doesn't have a free will because they're driven by hormones, but they still try to believe in free will. But then you find that the exceptions. Oh, I hear a siren in the background. What's that? Oh,
sorry, yeah.
No, that ain't me.
Oh, yeah, I guess it was on George's end. But yeah, what I was saying before the siren was they are not realizing that they are admitting the person doesn't have free will because they're driven by hormones. And as this progresses on, you find more and more cases where people are admitting how little free will somebody has, because they think there are cases where somebody has a free will that they really could have chosen otherwise. And yet I don't think ever one has ever actually been found. You know?
Yeah, and like with reproducing, what they would say, well, you know, like these hormones and stuff make people reproduce, but because not everybody reproduces, you know, some people override that stuff with their free will. That's what they would say.
Yeah, they might say that because, yeah, the very fact that some people like me are celibate, other people get sterilized so they don't have kids, you know. So, I mean, people can't override that. So that's an interesting case.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess.
But yeah, I guess. Go ahead, WC.
Well, like I said, it comes to that. The kids for me, I would not. You know, it was up to me. I wouldn't have any kids because, like I said, the universe is just complete shit, and this fucking society's complete shit, and I don't want to bring life into it. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the election and them putting the idiot in the White House, that just confirmed it. I'm just, humanity's getting dumber.
Yeah, we're living idiocracy. That it's real. It's not just a movie. It's real.
It's like we're moving through some kind of evolutionary phase. Like, you know, they had the Cro-Magnon and the Neanderthals, and it's like these Republicans are like the new Neanderthals. They're just, you know, they don't get it. I mean, like it's so beyond.
How did they get this position? People will say they earned it, but how in the fuck is that possible? Fuck did you let this happen? I don't get it.
Oh yeah, I know.
Every time I think about it, my fucking brain explodes. It hurts. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the thing. WSD, because like, yeah, you get pretty upset about this stuff, and I think we all do sometimes. But that's the interesting thing, is that we can, like, this is important for people to hear, is, yeah, we can be upset about what's going wrong, even though we're not blaming people. We can still say that they are being stupid and doing dumb things. So it sometimes helps to just talk with you guys and just kind of laugh about it, you know?
Right, and it does help, you know, because, like, yeah, fine, it helps us not to be angry with them. That you know, they're out of their minds, right? But it's just like we take a medical model. They're not responsible for being out of their minds. There's something deeply wrong with them, you know. But at least, it helps us to not have to blame them.
Stop at a half of it.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, yeah, and I think we've done a good job of covering the basic non-free will alternatives to blaming, you know, whether it's unconditional forgiveness or the medical model, you know. So it's not like it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we've done pretty good at that. But we still have time if you wanted to talk about something else, because we've only been going for about half an hour. So anything else you guys want to talk about?
Well, I've got another topic, but it's so completely different that we might just want to and I'm not sure how long we can go with it, but I can briefly introduce it, you know, on this podcast, and if we want to do it, we might want to just create a new one. This idea that there's 4 mind-blowing realities in, you know, part of reality. One, for example, is that, you know, time keeps on going back into the past and never stops, or that it'll keep going. The second one is that it'll keep going into the future and never stop. You know, like time never ends. And the third one is that we also recognize that space seems to be going outward, you know, and it doesn't end. Because, you know, they say that the universe expands, but expands into what and all?
Yeah.
Okay. The space thing, maybe, but the time thing, I'm not that knowledgeable on it.
Okay. Yeah, well, I guess maybe we should.
You can talk about it, but like I said, I'm going to tell you my quiet self, but you know.
I hear you. But the other one, just briefly, there's people don't realize this also, because just pick any point, you know, anywhere, just any dot, right, ever, a point on a piece of paper anywhere, and imagine going inward, you know, just with a microscope and just going in, getting smaller and smaller within that, right? Well, logic seems to tell us that you don't ever stop getting smaller within that, you know, because there's always something smaller. And to me, that means there's an infinite number of infinitely small universes, you know. It's kind of or you know.
Well, yeah, I agree there, George, because if it just keeps getting smaller and smaller, then you have all these little worlds, all these things explored, and that would never end.
Yeah, and all these little worlds are part of this big world, you know. I mean, there's only one. I mean, they kind of I guess, you know, from every point they get larger, but when they get larger, they kind of join together, I guess, with other points. Whereas when they get smaller and smaller and smaller within themselves. I mean, I don't know. You don't hear much about that.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, I often wonder what it's like for insects, you know, because, they're so small by comparison to humans that are they able to see smaller things that we can see? Like the things we can only see with a microscope, are the insects able to see with their very advanced eyes? Are they able to see microscopic stuff?
Like bacteria and shit like that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because I was thinking that. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Even though, like I said, you know, Jamie doesn't believe it, but I still believe there might be a multiverse out there where there are alternate versions of ourselves and all that.
Actually,
yeah.
WSD, I got it. Let's talk about Fresco, because you mentioned that it's kind of sad, but you know.
Oh yeah, that's right, because that was the reason that WSD, you're feeling kind of sad, so your at the beginning wasn't quite what it usually is.
Yeah, that kind of had that in mind. I mean, yeah, like I said, his speeches made sense. I mean, he's a great talker, and the way he convinced people kind of made me think that, okay.
Yeah.
See, it's kind of like saying, it's kind of like this. You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, basically.
Uh-huh.
And somehow, I think But me, the way he convinced people, I didn't think honey existed. All I know was just vinegar.
WSDtime, talk about. A lot of people don't know who Jacques, who he is. Fresco is. Just describe a bit of his work.
Well, if y'all look into his website, there's he was trying to build a trying to teach people, educate people, not preach. I don't want to say preach, but educate people on reasons why he does what he does, and
Did he create the Venus Project? Is that his project?
Oh yeah, he did. Yes. I've never been good at explaining this. This is why I kind of stopped making videos. But yeah, he did create the Venus Project, and this Venus Project is basically going to be a utopia where it's going, instead of working on a monetary system, it's going to be a resource-based economy where it's not how much money you make, it's just based on the resource you can produce, basically. And it's hard to explain.
No, it's the idea is doing away with money, just like and maybe sharing things and stuff. I hear you.
Yeah, pretty much doing away with money, basically. And the reason why I didn't want to say that, because if people say, if they hear me say doing away with money, they're gonna say, "What do you mean do away with money? I work hard for my money." That kind of gets clicks in their head, and that it creates this whole cycle. Like, what are you talking about? I earned this. Yeah.
Well, and people feel the same way about free will. What do you mean I don't have a free will? You mean I can't take credit for stuff I've done? I hear you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to word it in a different way, but I'm nowhere near as good as Frosco was. But yeah.
Yeah, and Jamie usually talks about this kind of stuff, but Jamie hasn't been able to join us on the podcast recently because he's having, difficult family situation, and his brothers, like he has one brother that sleeps at night, the other brother sleeps during the day, and either one complains if they hear him talking. So I feel sorry for him.
Yeah, right now, because I talked to him earlier, he said he was getting tired, so I guess he's in bed now. And I can kind of understand doing this at 7 at night because where he's at, it's like 1 in the morning. So yeah, I can see why that's so fucking late.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing you gotta take account of fucking time zone.
We might want to go back to, I think when we started at 5, was it? I mean, who knows?
I thought it was earlier than that. I thought it was around 2. Okay, I guess.
2?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it was always earlier. Sometimes I remember back when I had that other job, I couldn't do it because of that other job I had at the stadium.
Okay, so yeah, we might want to consider going back to a different time. Just like job. Also like David hasn't joined us because it's the same. Again, it's so late in England.
Yeah, I know. Because I remember for a while we were doing these like at 2 p.m. Central my time is what we had been doing. But then I think we actually tried to make it later so that somebody else could join us because they were working during the day. So yeah, this is just one of those.
It might have been me.
Yeah, or it could have been Mitch or Michael Walsh. I'm not even sure. But yeah, this is just one of those problems where when you've got people with different schedules who live in different countries and wacky stuff like that, it's really hard to find a time when we can all meet to do podcasts.
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Well, Chandler, you might want to send a group email and just like, maybe asking people, what the best times are, and just like, just weighing, who says it, like in terms of like, for example, how often they participate and stuff, because some people aren't on that much, but would want to. I know David Joseph used to be on pretty much every podcast, and like when we changed the time, it became difficult for him, so he might be able to join us again more regularly. If you have the time, I mean, I kind of like this time because it allows me to be outside a bit more in the summer. But if it brings more people in, it might be good to experiment with a different time.
Yeah, that may be a good idea to just like take a vote and see who would like to move it earlier, or if the current time works out, you know. Because I do want to talk to our British people again. I kind of miss talking to them.
Yeah. Oh, Anthony, I haven't heard of him in a while either.
Oh yeah, Anthony's a lot of fun, isn't he?
Yep. He's a goofy one. Well, I used to be an angry one, but I've been calming down these past couple of years, so.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I don't know. Just like, I don't know. I don't judge people like I used to anymore. Just like the guy that got, the one that got kicked out of his house, he said the bank kind of messed him over. And the bank said, I'm sorry, ain't nothing I can do. Sorry about that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Nothing you can do.
Yeah, but it does. This whole free will thing, it helps us to not respond with anger when stuff happens.
Yeah. It doesn't mean we're not upset, but what it does mean is that we just try to look at the causes that make people that way in the hopes that we can prevent other people from doing the same things if we understand the causes and can change something. Even though sometimes I get sad because it doesn't feel like we can ever do enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what that serenity prayer is about. Like, accept the things we can't change. And, that's also very Buddhist. And it's also very Stoic. The Stoics said, like, we're supposed to do our best at whatever we try to do, or, but, like, things aren't up to us. They got it. So, like, when things don't work out our way, just be content that we tried as best we could.
Yeah, exactly. You did your best, and that's all anyone can do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cause guys, like I've been thinking, like, cause I recently had my 30th birthday, and I've been thinking, like, I want things to be different in my life from now on. I want to be happy and not just always upset at all the evil in the world.
Yeah.
Well, Chandler, here's the thing. The reason we do the Free Will podcast, and also the reason we do the Philosophy, Science, and Religion podcast, is to help create a happier world, a better world. And usually a better world has to do, to a great extent, with happiness. And so we may want to kind of like explore happiness in more detail, because what I've done, happiness has been one of my, research interests over the years. I did like 138 episodes on it, a TV series back 15 years ago. And what I find is that, like, when I think about it, when I practice it, because I really practice happiness like people, go to the gym. And it really helps. I mean, like, just recently it's been kicking in a lot. I'll go to like downtown and sit on a bench and say to myself, all right, now what I'm going to do is just watch people go by and get happier and happier. And so, like, and it works, it's good.
Cool.
So we might want to talk about happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because, that never hurts.
Yeah. Just like me, I've been down taking walks lately, even though my back has been bothering me lately. It's just, yeah. So
yeah, because the other
like,
part.
Yeah.
Go ahead, WC.
I'll go downtown. Sometimes I'll go to certain events. Like a couple of weeks ago, they had this thing. Well, you're not in Philly, so you're not going to know where South Street is, but this is, they had the whole street blocked off, and they were having this festival. It was a lot of fun, though. They had dancers, there were people dancing, and I don't know, you don't have my Facebook account. I'll tell you after podcast, but yeah, but I don't, that's family only, so don't expect me to add y'all, but still, it's, it was a lot of fun down there. I just had fun.
Yeah.
Pay around, talk to a few people.
See, because another thing is, like, what after Trump won, I said, oh my God, I don't want to waste any more time trying to get people to do things that, for whatever reason, they're not capable of doing. Either they're just like not moral enough or not intelligent enough. And so like for example, like a lot of my political work was about that. And I said, rather than wasting time, if I work on happiness, and use myself kind of like to experiment with it, fine, I may not be able to help other people as much as I'd like to, but then it's not wasted time because at least I'm helping myself. And like when I help myself, then the people that I spend time with, I can talk with them about it, and at least I can make some kind of an influence in my personal life. And so that's the benefit of happiness, is like to explore it. It's not wasted effort if we're not able to like convince the whole world of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I don't want to waste too much time trying to convince people of stuff. I want to just have some happiness in my life because, hey, life is short,
That's the hard part. Like I said, if I'm going to convince somebody, I'm going to try to convince people I know they're going to want to be convinced. Because, trying to convince anybody else that don't want to be convinced, that's an uphill battle. Yeah, that fly ain't going to be tricked by that honey.
All right, so let me ask you something, because like one thing that we have in common, in addition to not, understanding we don't have a free will, is like we care about the world, and a lot of times we care about the world at our expense. We become angry, we become sad, we spend a lot of time learning stuff and trying to teach people stuff, and so and then so it does affect us. We get so I don't know, maybe we might want to consider creating a third podcast depending on how we're feeling as a group. When we're feeling, let's say, optimistic and really working on helping the world, then we either do a free will podcast or a philosophy, science, and religion. But when we're feeling kind of like, well, it's time to take care of ourselves, we might like want to do a happiness, science, and religion or something. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know. Because I guess we haven't officially closed our episode yet. But this is all good stuff to talk about, to give people a heads up for what we may talk about in future shows and stuff. So let's see. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to say before we do an official closing to this episode?
Rest in peace, Jack Frosto.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yeah. Yeah, well, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion, and we started out by talking about alternative ways by which people who don't blame people, even if they believe people have a free will, they find reasons to not blame people and to not get as angry at them for certain reasons. And then we kind of got talking into other interesting topics that we may cover more in some of our future shows. And we're all a little bit sad about Jack Fresco dying, because he was a smart dude and he won't be able to speak anymore, but there's a lot of recordings of his. So stay safe, everybody, and thank you for listening.